with a guest lecture today, and I want to make some, I want to make one announcement for you. And we have on the GFA Christmas party. We have it this week on Thursday, December 11th at 7:30. And before, there is a company presentation from IQIT, and this is a very interesting and challenging company presentation, and you can meet executives there, and there will be HR recruiters, so you have the chance to present yourself on the next Thursday this week, December 11th, and the company presentation will start at 6:30, and after the company presentation at 7:30 we have our Christmas party from Goethe Finance Association in the House of Finance. So you are all warmly invited coming to this Christmas party. So now today we have a guest lecture, and we have for the first time a combination or a synthesis between two big research fields. And one of this research field is leadership, and the other one is behavioral economics. And behavioral economics, and together with leadership, we want to hear some implications, ideas, because behavioral economics is a research field which is studying effects of social, cognitive, psychological and emotional factors, and it is very interesting for decision making in organizations or business or in the macroeconomic field. And behavioral economics will show some borders, of the so-called rationality in decision making, and therefore we will hear today our guest lecturer, and we will learn and we will hear which ideas are generated from behavioral economics to leadership, because making optimized or optimal leadership decisions are one of the most interested tasks in the organization. And all organizations and companies have an interest in ensuring that their leaders make optimal, efficient, multi-party oriented, future oriented and successful decisions. So there has changed a lot more over the years about how executives make decisions. Not only the greater number of the variables which are to consider, also executives also need to make subjective judgments about highly ambitious factors, and that are moving the targets of these businesses. And executives are wrestling with more qualitative factors with no conventional methodology, under the real threat that part of his or her business has peaked out or could become relevant or irrelevant. So any decisions the leader make will be judged in the court of public. That's another new environment, social media, Twitter, and all these things, and all these are looking on the decisions of a leader. So we want to look all of these factors, and some leaders are ultimately successful in juggling multiple demands. But that's very important. Not all leaders achieve the desired results when they face situations that require a variety of decisions and a variety of responses. All these things are factors we have to think on in our decision makings. There are decision traps, for example, and other areas for sub-optimized leadership decisions. And there is an art of decision making, leadership and the art of decision making. And the huge variety can be overwhelming for the leader without clear guidance about when to use one tool or combinations of tools over another combination of tools. So there are fundamental questions we have to ask for leadership and decision making, and we want to hear later some answers on these questions. As you, for example, if you are a leader, a top executive, as you ponder which tools appropriate for a given context, there are two fundamental questions we have learned in research. Do I know what it will take to succeed? Question number one. Other question, second question, can I predict the range of possible outcomes? These are two fundamental questions. And you have to ask yourself as the leader for question number one. What are you asking yourself? You ask yourself, do you understand what combinations of critical success factors will determine whether your decision leads to successful outcome? One question. Do you know what metrics, and we will hear later a lot of that, do you know what metrics need to be met to ensure your success? And another question which you have asking yourself, do you have a precise understanding of almost a recipe how to achieve success? And another bundle of questions to the second part of the fundamental question is, can you define the range of outcomes that could result from your decision, both in the aggregate and for each critical success factor? And can you evaluate the probability of each outcome? All these questions we have to discuss, and we want to hear later in our guest lecture. So, now I want to come to our guest lecturer. He is from Milano, and well, we have a lot of Milano. The last week there was also an executive from Milano, and a great welcome to Dr. Enrico Trevisan. He is a partner of Simon-Kucher Partners, and I will give you some information about his biography. Enrico Trevisan is one of the leading experts in behavioral economics applied to commercial strategy. Since 2010, Dr. Trevisan has been a partner in the financial service division of Simon-Kucher Partners, strategy and marketing consultants. The world leader in marketing, sales and pricing consultancy. He has wrote some books and a lot of articles. I will tell you his books, The Irrational Consumer, or the book Value Pricing, or in German Selbstbindung, and many of his articles dedicated to behavioral economics, strategy and marketing. They have been translated into a number of languages and published in various countries. So, research into the area of behavioral economics and its potential applications in the world of business have represented a principal focus in his work. with over 20 studies, and alongside his consultancy activities, he appears regularly as an expert speaker at conferences and as a guest lecturer at universities and worldwide business schools. In his consulting area, Dr. Trevisan has assisted some of the biggest international banking and industrial groups on matters relating to market strategies, innovation in pricing and offering, and distribution and sales, and very important strategy questions in big banks. For his educational background, Dr. Trevisan has completed a master's in business research and a PhD in strategic management and organizational theory with a focus on behavioral economics at the University of Munich, and following his degree in political science from the University of Turin. So, a great welcome, Dr. Trevisan, to your guest lecture for today, and we are very pleased and happy to have you here. Welcome.
Professor Trummer, thank you very much for a kind introduction. I always start a speech with one difficult question, and at the end I tend to have only an easy answer. The difficult question is, does somebody know something about behavioral economics? Sorry? You did raise your hand. Please.
Behavioral economics is the branch of economics founded by Daniel
Kahneman?
Yeah, Kahneman. And it's basically revolving around the interaction of people with the incentive or psychological factors. I mean, for example, how do you behave with, in particular situation, with a particular kind of policy, something like that.
Okay, thank you very much. Good short description of behavioral economics. Not completely wrong. A second difficult question. Do you remember who won the Nobel Prize in Economics this year? And last year? It sounds like a French guy. Okay? Now, more difficult question. What's about last year? It was not French. Which, by the way, the rules, they are typically American. Does somebody remember the names? Were 3 professors? We showed the picture of 2 of them. Thank you. Mr. Eugene Fama and Robert Schiller. Do you remember why they won the Nobel Prize in Economics? They won the Nobel Prize in Economics for saying something completely different about the same question, which was how the market price asset, which is a fundamental question, of course, in a finance faculty. And Mr. Fama, who invented the rational market efficiency hypothesis, said markets are perfectly rational. Every price, every information available in the market are completely priced in the value of the asset, so there is no way to beat the market. There is no way to make in a rational way better of the market, because either information is public available and then it's already priced, it's a kind of Tenet theory, or is not available, is unknown, then cannot be used to price the asset. the value of the to find out the value of securities. In the same day, Mr. Robert Shiller won the Nobel Prize in Economics for saying something pretty much at the opposite side of finance theory, which was markets are completely or very often irrational. They tend to be driven by so-called irrational exuberance, which is a mechanism by the people or the market actor tend to drive their evaluation of the price asset using factors that are completely independent from the business fundamentals of the company they are pricing. So the price evaluation is very much more a psychological factor, is very much more driven by psychological irrational factor than by classical rational calculation of the future cash flow of the priced asset. This kind of dichotomy in talking about price and in talking about economic rationality was a new thing for the Nobel Prize, or was an old thing? Was an old dichotomy? The answer is, I know you don't know the answer, so I'll give you the answer, so we save a couple of minutes. The answer is a very old discussion. It's a very old discussion in economics to say, which says, do economic actors act in a rational way or they don't? Look at this story. In 1976, Milton Friedman won the Nobel Prize in saying, I don't assume that economic decision makers use rational-oriented decision model, but they do act as if they would. They don't start making decisions, taking their Excel spreadsheet, making difficult calculation about opportunities, about probabilities, about payoff, and so on, value, utility curve, and all this stuff, but they do as if. Like instinctively, they do as if. 2 years later, Herbert Simon won the Nobel Prize to say something pretty much again at the opposite side of the agenda. Saying, no, actually economic actors are not optimizing actors. They don't make decisions in order to optimize expected values, but they simply make decisions based on the very limited capability of elaborate information. So they tend to make satisfying decisions. They know they are not the best decision of the world, but they know they don't have enough cognitive power and time to look for this perfect decision. So they just take some decision that is more or less acceptable. In 1992, Gary Becker brought the discussion again to the other side and said, well, at the very end, we cannot say that a decision was irrational by observing what the decision maker does, because we can't, and we neither can say the decision is irrational by observing the results. Because every time we observe the results, we need to understand the value proposition and the utility function that a consumer or a decision maker had. So you cannot say addiction is drugs addiction is an irrational decision, because it could simply be that in the preference structure of this person to be addicted was the best option. Maybe he has a very complex time discounting approach. Maybe he has a very complex way to value different options, and this is his best option. As you mentioned before, so that was why your answer was right. Again, in 2002, Daniel Kahneman won the Nobel Prize for basically inventing behavioral economics. And what he said, together with Serge Maid, which was at the time already died, with Intervensky, what he said was a pretty simple message, was we actually are irrational, and we are predictably irrational because our decision-making process, our judgment and decision-making process are biased by factors that are very clear, very understandable, and we can predict them. Okay? So the goal of today's lecture is to show you what was the idea behind this Kahneman Nobel Prize and what the research fields of behavioral economics discovered starting from this very basic assumption. Okay? So now, everybody please attention. You also with your mobile phone, because it's going to be a very difficult slide for you, especially for, okay, just, are you ready? Look at this picture. Think 30 seconds about this picture. Okay? Perfect. Now look to this other picture and think, I give you now 1 minute. The first who came out with the results, please. Not using the mobile phone. Wrong.
1,875.
Right. Look at this picture again and tell me not really what you think about that, but how you did think about it. Please?
Yeah, I don't know. At first, I thought that I saw those persons before. And I think actually I did. So it's two celebrities, and there's some love going on. And then I was thinking, it can't be true love, it must be like a movie, something like that.
No.
So, but it was an easier picture to understand and to calculate.
Very important word, thank you. Very important word, easy. I tell you now what I did thought about what I did think about this picture. I'm out of danger. Finally, my wife will stop daydreaming about marrying him. And I'm pretty sure I know what my wife said or thought. Oh, this is terrible. It's definitely gone. You lucky girl. Now, we go back to the mathematics question, and you probably did something horrible like this. If you learn it, but I assume that you learn it because you are here. Now, we go to the fundamental question, how you did it. I have some hypotheses. What you did was recognize the faces, understand the situation, remember gossip, connected it with topics, generated opinion. It was a movie. And how you did it, very important, quickly, automatically, instinctively, effortlessly, easy, and subconsciously. We use this expression, you just jump to a conclusion about that picture. No really difficult mental work was required to get to a result. Right? Now look at this. When you did identify the task, activated mathematical abilities, use short or switch on your mobile phone, use short-term memory to recall the sub-part of the operation, and operated it iteratively. How you did it? Slowly, logically, methodologically, thoughtfully, consciously. This is a very easy dichotomy. This is a very easy approach to better understand the way we think and the way we get to decision in our life. Independently, whether it's economic, private, business, sentimental part of our life. Okay, so I will use this kind of dichotomy to show you, to explain you, strange phenomenon in the decision-making process that can be very easily explained by using this dichotomy and, generally speaking, the behavioral economics approach, but very often are very difficult to explain using the classical microeconomic rational consumer, rational actor approach. Okay? Look at this picture. One group of students was posed in front of this question. Listen, you're buying a calculator for $15 and a jacket for $125. At a branch store located 20 minutes away, you could get a discounted jacket from $5 less. The question was, would you walk to this other store in order to get the jacket for $10 less or not? Answer, 29% of the people says, yes, I would, but the vast majority say, I wouldn't. In the other experiment, they just switched the price. This was no longer a basic calculator, it was probably like an EHP calculator. It was not as longer a Xenia jacket, it was like an H&M jacket. But still, 125 plus 10. But in this case, the discount was based on $5, was not based on a 120 price tag, but on the 10 price tag. On the same product, the jacket, within the same budget constraint, 15 plus 125, but on a different price tag. Same question, would you walk, would you drive in order to get this discount? Yes, 68% of the case, no, 32%. For the people who had some kind of background information on microeconomics, I already gave the two fundamental hits. The decision is practically identical from that point of view because the budget constraint is the same, and the so-called consumer utilities apply to the same product. The big difference is that we apply the same discount to a different reference point. And in one case, the reference point was a high number, 120, and in the other case was a small number, 15. And it was very easy to understand that a €5 discount on 120 price is a good discount, but nothing dramatic. But €5 discount on a price of 15 was a 1/3 discount, 32%. So a very important discount. We wanted to take the deal. Was not important the money, was not important the product, was important the relationship we built in our mind between what we could pay to what we should pay. Look at these other experiments. They took a group of experts in real estate consultants, and they gave them three kinds of information for two apartments. The first one was a guided tour through the house, through the apartment, and information packages describing the dimension, the characteristics, tax aspect, all the technical information, and a kind of listing price, a kind of price suggestion. And this price suggestion was $65,900. To another group, they made pretty much the same, but they simply, of course the apartment was the same, the description was the same, they simply changed the price level from 65 to 83,900. And the task was asking this real estate agent to give their judgment about what could be a fair value, a pricing exercise for this apartment? Answer, 67 in the first case and 75 in the second case. The only change in the set of relays information was in the anchor and the listing price, because otherwise everything was equal, the so-called Chittery spirals. Okay, everything is equal. But still, although they were so-called experts, they used in a very important way, especially if you consider the percentage difference, in a very important way, they used the information we gave to them, which was this listing price, as an anchor. And they let influence their judgment from this anchor. Very interesting, less than 25% of the agents mentioned the listing price as one of the factors they considered. So they used the listing price as an anchor to give a relative evaluation, and they were not really aware of that in talking about their decision. Implication for successful leadership. We value option always in relative terms. The reference point of our evaluation is often as important as the expected results of our decision. This is all true also for experts. Providing the right decision framework is a key task in leading decision-making process. On choice. Look at this experiment. They asked one group of people, it was Schwarz 2004, to indicate their intention to buy a Sony MT3 player, which was discounted from 60 to 48 euros. And the people say, well, this is a good deal in 66% of the case, but in 34% of the cases say, no, I don't know, I will wait. They made something in a second experiment which will be very much something that the dealer, retailer would like to say, you know what, I don't give you only the opportunity to buy a Sony MT3 player, but also an Apple one. And I make also an important discounts also in the Apple one. So the decision in this case was from 60 to 48 for the Sony one, and also very good discount from 159 to 127 for Apple Nano. Same question again, in which product would you buy? 27% dramatic decrease market share by Sony, important market share from Apple, but most important, more people than before decided to wait. Which is, of course, something very difficult to explain from a rational point of view, because when you have a product and you have a market, you have a certain probability to match the preference of this market with your product. But if you have two products, of course, the possibility to match the preference of your market increase. Maybe very slowly, but very few percentage points, but some has to increase. This is exactly the opposite of what's happened. The matching ability of the retailer increased because the number of people who bought was less. Why this was happening? Very simple explanation. Because when you have to decide between this alternative and not buy something, you have a very easy decision. Do I want a Sony discounted or not? But if you start this kind of exercise, then you already have something more complicated, because you have one question, do I want a Sony or do I want an Apple? And the second question, what do I prefer? And because the so-called opportunity cost, what we don't take, okay, what we leave or left on the table, when we take a decision, does influence our behavior. The more opportunity, the more options I have, the bigger will be my opportunity cost. Because it's not true the opportunity costs are only the second best options. All the available options stay somehow in my mind, and tells me, wow, making this decision is pretty complicated. And sometimes a complicated decision is a postponed decision. To prove this phenomenon, what they did was to make this decision even easier. And how they make this decision easier? Well, very simple. Say this is the product, this counts, and the alternative is a no-name product for $50, which is even higher than the brand product. So make it very clear that this was a good deal. And it worked, because the people who waited drove down again from 34 to 22. Now, the question is, how important is complexity in our judgment and decision-making process? How much complexity can we manage in taking a decision? They make these experiments in order to investigate exactly this question. And the experiment was the following. They show a marmalade dispenser, okay, in one case with 6 varieties, and in the other case with 24 varieties. It was a real shop, and the first day there was like only 6 marmalade, and in the other day was 24. Of course, it was a very well done scientific experiment. They measure for all other external factors, weather, competitor pricing, competitor offering, all these kind of elements. And they had 3 questions. How many people are interested in these jams? Second question, how many people did really try, tasted the jams? And third question, of course the most important for the retailer, how many people did buy these jams? And look at the answer. The larger variety, the 24 option, generated a higher attraction. So more people get close to the jam stacks. But when you already see, ask for the same propensity from sampling, so trying these marmalades, the number was pretty much the same. So the number of people who tried, really tried, tasted this marmalade was pretty much the same. And then, at the key question, how many people did buy, the larger variety led to less sales. And again, very strange phenomenon from a rational point of view, but very easy to explain phenomenon from a behavioral point of view. Our decision-making are not only influenced by the expected outcome that we are able to search for without any kind of a cognitive limitation. Very often we step search and decision because we have the impression it's too complicated to get there. So when a decision is too complex, we simply don't decide. Or this is the risk, or this is the tendency. Implication. The complexity of a choice strongly influences its results. We tend to avoid or postpone difficult choices. Transforming right decision into easy decision once is a fundamental instrument for leading towards desired action. We don't take right decision very often. We do take easy decision. We take System 1 decision more than System 2 decision. And remember, look at this experiment. Very, very interesting in my opinion. There was like a therapy where the pain suffered by the patient was very different. And they measured it along different dimensions. The first dimension was the length of the therapy. For patient category A was only 9 minutes. And for a patient category B was 24 minutes. So one took longer than the other. The peak, so the moment in the therapy that was most strong in terms of sufferance was 8 and 8, so was pretty much the same. But another important difference was that like the last 30 seconds of the therapy, the patient number A suffered much more than the patient number B, pain before the conclusion. So if you look at this picture, you see clearly that the peak of the pain was the same. Patient number A had much less pain than patient number B, but at the end, people answering the question, what kind of therapy was that pain, drive the patient, the group number 1 higher than the group number 2. So people suffered longer, but say that they suffered less. And why was this happening? Because our memory is driven by very specific moments in the reconstruction of the past. Just imagine, our memory has to select what we live, what we experience, otherwise we simply wouldn't have enough saving capacity. So just imagine a video camera that works for a year, every second. So what we do is to put some kind of hints about the past in our brain, and then when we are asked about recalling, we tend to reconstruct the past using like business technology, only small pieces of information. And the two most important pieces of information we use are the most virulent moment in the experience and the last one. So the peak of the experience and the end part of the experience. Okay? And in this case, keeping the peak the same, but changing the end had much more influence than what was actually the experience by itself, which was again 9 minutes of pain against 33, so almost 4. Okay? Look at this. How much would you pay to buy insurance for a flight from New York to London, which will provide 100,000 coverage of life insurance in case of death due to? Option number 1, any act of terrorism. Option number 2, any no terrorism related mechanical reason. Option number 3, group number 3, any reason at all. No matter what was the cause, we will pay. The question is, what is your willingness to pay for this kind of insurance? And look at your results. Act of terrorism, $14. Mechanical failure, $10. Any reason, $12. So, our mind tells us, if you insure me against terrorism, I pay you more than if you insure me against everything, including terrorism. And why this happened? Because nobody really likes to think about insurance reason. What could happen there? Okay? They just kind of try to reduce as much as possible that kind of consideration, because the insurance is the classical product that you buy for something that you would like not to happen. Okay? So, it's very easier to jump very fast to a judgment about a terrorism attack than to switch our system to mental work and say, well, I should buy insurance because this reason, this reason, this reason, this reason, this reason. A terrorism attack come to our mind much easily, and that's why we judge this product much more valuable than a product that generally say my coverage is for everything. So very often, the value of a product and our related willingness to pay is not really influenced by the characteristic of the product, but how easily we can think about the impact of this characteristic, how easily we can recall to our mind the utility of this product. And of course can drive to this kind of paradox. Implication, the information we use to assess situation is not only selected based on their factual relevance and correctness. The ease by which they come to our mind plays a great role in this context. Making information available at the right moment strongly influences the opinion building process. Please.
Yeah, I would say to this question that to buy an insurance, I mean, in this case, probably it was a life insurance, right? It's actually funny that people buy insurances because they would be dead, apparently, right? So it would be for the relatives or something like that. So I don't know if I would buy it.
Yeah, you don't have children probably,
yeah, exactly.
right? I do, so it's,
yeah.
it's a different product. But if you start to have children or like brother or sister, you can start to think about this kind of product. But again, it doesn't make any difference when you get into considering to buy this kind of product. Then what drives you to think it's a good product or you need this product is the interesting part of the exercise.
Yeah.
You know? This is a very difficult question, even more difficult than the two at the very beginning of the lecture. Can you just make one guess? What could represent these distributions? These are different countries, and these are percentage, are not public debts. All European countries are not public debt. You know, I'm Italian, it could be a danger zone for me. It's impossible, it could be everything. Now I give you one information. This is simply a representation of organ donors. I spent like 20 minutes with my team in finding out the right combination of these countries, okay, in order to give you like a rational explanation about this distribution. Cultural, political, they are pretty much mixed. There is no South Europe, Western, Eastern Europe, and so on. You have a thesis?
I'm not sure about it, but I've heard that it's like makes a lot of difference if you're asked to make a decision about it or not. So maybe they would just send letters to them and ask them to actually say if they want to donate or not. Because in Germany it's just like you have to carry this card around in order to be an organ donor, and for people to act by themselves, it probably takes a lot more than just not contradict to giving organs.
Simplicity and default is very much the explanation. You're pretty much right. Look at this. Default option, no. Per default, you are not an organ donor. You have to make something actively in order to become an organ donor. And for this country, the default option is yes. You don't need to do anything to become a donor. You are one. Of course, you have the right to say I don't wanna. Of course, it's even your constitutional right. But the default option, exactly what you said, are the different. Look what kind of dramatic impact. Look at this experiment. We go back to Italy. Actually, it was run in the US, but I really think the results are pretty good. Starting point for a group number 1. The people could decide to eat a basic pizza, cheese pizza, for $5. And then they had in front of them a very easy choice to make. 12 additional ingredients at cost of 50 cents of dollar each. So make the pizza you want. You can add until 12 ingredients, and you will pay for every single ingredient 50 cents of dollar. The number of ingredients selected, the additional ingredient, and it was not intentional, was really measured, they really did it, was 2.71. In the other experiment, they made, from an economic point of view, exactly the same exercise. So what they did, they took the 12 ingredients, they put it on the pizza all together, and they said, listen, your pizza is this one, has everything you want, it costs $11, but don't worry. You can take away every single ingredient, and every time you will get a discount of 50 cents a dollar. So in one case, 50 cents a dollar, you need one ingredient, in the other case, you take it away. But pretty much same decision over here. Look at the results, 5.29. Now, let me make a provocative answer. What is the right number of ingredients for a pizza? I will tell you, on average, I know it, I already told you where I'm from, 3.5. Why do we get to 3.5, but we get to 2.71 in one case, and 5.29 in the other, and 3.5 is pretty much in the middle? Very simple explanation. I have an empty pizza. Okay, and I have 12 ingredients to choose from. I switch my system to brain, and I start to say, pepperoni, 50 cents, yes or not? Mushrooms, 50 cents, yes or not? But it's mental work. It takes energy. So I do it, but I will stop somewhere. I will not get to the right number of ingredients. Now, in the other situation, I'm confronted with a very similar scenario. Do I really want pepperoni? No. Take pepperoni. Do I really want mushrooms? No. Take them. I do some mental work. But again, I will somewhere stop. An incredible thing, I stop very much at a similar point, which means that where my decision will end up is not what I want, but where I start from. Look at these examples. We ask two groups of people, we show them different risks, and we ask them, in one case, to select all the risks you are not worried about. And people came up, they were not worried about 2.53 risks. The other were all relevant risks. In the other exercise, we made pretty much the opposite. We show exactly the same risk, but this time the question was, please tell me which risks are relevant. And look, the number was pretty much the same. With a paradox that in this case, starting from 10, the relevant risks were 7.47, and here was 2.96, so 7 and 3. Just because I reframe the decision work in one case in tell me something, and in the other case in not tell me something. In one case edit something, and the other case taking them. Implication: letting original suggestion reach pre-existence, reaching pre-existence preferences require cognitive effort. I don't want to open the box, do pre-existence preference exist or not. Just imagine they do exist. We tend to manage this irrelevant task only partially. For this reason, the starting point influences judgment and decision as much as the expected outcome. Correctly selecting it strongly leads to desired behavior. On losses. Look at this experiment. It was run, again, this case by Kahneman in 1990s. They took a group of students, very similar to you, and they divided them randomly, completely randomly, in the group of students who gave for free a coffee mug, and the other group that didn't. The coffee mug was a standard mug from a coffee cup from the campus. There was no kind of sentimental connection to this coffee mug because they was just distributed. So they wait a couple of minutes and then they started the market. The market was very simple. The one who received the coffee mug was allowed to sell it, and the students who didn't were allowed to buy it. And they started to measure something very important in economics, which is the willingness to pay and the readiness to sell. And the numbers were completely different. In this case was the people who were selling the Mac were willing to sell the Mac at least for $5.25, and the people who were buying, willing to buy, they were willing to buy only for $2.75. It looks like, other than what we assume in economics, losing something doesn't correspond to not winning something. Just imagine, one of the fundamental tenets, assumptions of the economic theory is that the only costs are important are the so-called the opportunity cost. Opportunity cost. When I do take a decision, the only thing that counts is the first alternatives I leave on the table. And when I buy something and I sell something, I always have a win and a loss, or if you want, an opportunity cost and an opportunity win. Meaning, in this case, when I sell the mug, what do I have? I lose my mug, okay, and I gain money. Okay. In the other perspective, in the seller perspective, sorry, in the buyer perspective, what does happen? That I win the mug and I lose money. But if we assume that losing and winning is not the same as in the economic theory as assumed, so I mean, foregone wins equal to loss, opportunity cost, then the very fact that I am a seller or a buyer drive completely away from each other the price level. Losing something is much more difficult than not winning something. This is the key message. Losing something is much more difficult than not winning something. Look at this example. We would like to remind you that the discounting conference fee for early registration is available until July 10th. There was a group of PhD students who were attending to a conference, so like very well educated and rational people, supposedly. And they sent them a letter and said, listen, if you register early, we will make you a discount on the conference fee. And pretty much 67% of the people registered early. But then reframed the letter in terms of losing something. In this case was winning something, a discount, and in this case was losing something, a penalty. So, we would like to remind you that the conference fee will include a penalty for late registration after the July 10th. 92% of the people registered early. It was exactly the same money on the table for exactly the same phenomenon, but in one case was framed as a win or a foregone win, and in the other case was framed as a loss or a expected loss. This is even more interesting. We asked people to decide whether they would accept an exchange, a change in the return of the investment on their deposit grant. So what was the story? The story was, listen, you have a 4% time deposit. You know, time deposit, you go to the bank, you get some, you leave the money on the bank for 6 months in this case, and you get an interest rate. Very specific period to this now, because in Germany in some cases, either in some couple of few banks. So until now, it was a system 1 lecture. Very easy to understand. Now you need to concentrate on maybe system 2, but still you can do it. Should I go on? Should I? Can you make it? Just bring it behind us. And we say, listen, the interest rates are going down. We can no longer offer you 4%, but still we can offer you 3%. Would you be interested?
The other lecture room has the same problem.
Ah, okay, okay. And so the message was no longer possible. I think we need system 3 here. Anyway, come on, let's make together an effort. So the message was, we can no longer offer you 4%, would you accept 3%? And 48% of the people say, no. It's not possible, I don't accept it. The same day, in the same place, we ran a very different experiment, which was the market interest rates are going up. So we told to the people, listen, today you get 1% from your deposit, time deposit, we can increase it to 2%. Would you accept it? And the answer was yes in 84% of the cases. So what is the paradox here? It's very easy to understand. We have 48% of the people who accept an interest rate of 2%, and 84% of the people who accept a positive interest rate of 1% or 2%. So it looks like making 2% money is more interesting than 3%. Of course, it's nonsense. Why is this happening? Probably because when the answer to the question was some voices in the background, you were not concentrated. But an even more important explanation coming from behavioral economics is the following. If I go from 4 to 3%, I do concentrate on the 3%, but probably the most important issue is that I'm losing 1 percentage point return. So I'm losing something. If I go from 2 to 3%, from 1 to 2%, I do care about 2%, but even the most important thing is that I'm gaining 1%. 1 percentage point, sorry, 1 percentage point. And the final state of wealth, that's called the final results of the decision, is important, but as we say, even more important, the way we frame this decision, meaning in terms of losses or in terms of wins. The unachieved gains are evaluated more weakly than potential losses. Framing decision in terms of losses or gains strongly influence the relative evaluation. It can be easier to deter behavior by encouraging the connected losses than inducing them by stressing the corresponding gains. Okay, maybe we use now a couple of minutes to answer some questions, so maybe it's a little bit less our attention. One question for you, please. Please. Okay, for you? Do somebody have a question?
Okay.
Yeah, one general question. Don't tell me you lose the concentration because of the... Oh, perfect, please.
You were talking about the configuration of the products, and you had the pizza example.
Yes.
And when we were talking about removing ingredients,
yes.
We said that we would still have more on them, and we referred it to the system 2 being at work as well. So it takes a lot of effort to think about and to decide whether I want to remove it or not. I would have guessed that also what would have played a role is losing something. So maybe it's harder to lose something even though you gain 50 cents each, but you have that whole pizza, you already have all those ingredients on there.
Yeah.
So it's hard to remove something even though maybe in the first place you wouldn't have chosen pepperoni on there.
Yeah.
But you already have it on there. Does that effect play a role as well?
Yeah. This is a very, very, very smart observation, because this gets exactly to the so-called cumulative effects in the behavioral economics explanation. So, first of all, system 1, system 2 is a kind of a general framework. What is easier to think about, okay? And of course, the easier, the more is thought. Okay, so we are able to get very fast to a conclusion. We will tend to get to this conclusion. What makes that exercise more like virulent, more present in our mind? And part of the story is told through loss aversion. Because I start to see something that goes away from my so-called endowment, from what I have, and I don't want to lose it. So make my thinking more like straightforward, because this is the kind of feeling I get. But again, why do I get this feeling? Why do I get that feeling of losing something? Because of the default option. And the starting decision point, the decision of the alternatives were exactly had exactly these characteristics. In one case, taking away ingredients, in one case, adding something. In one case, losing, and in the other case, gaining. So it's pretty much a cumulative explanation, starting from the way we think, what drives this virulent thinking, and what drives in the configuration in the framework this kind of process. So, very good question. Thank you. Please.
I'm thinking about a similar question. If you look at Apple,
yes.
They are very clever at marketing and everything. But if you look at the pricing policy, for example, of let's take the iPad. They sell the base version with 16 gigabyte of RAM for, let's say, 500 euro. And then you can have the next version with, I think the next version is 64 gigabyte at the moment, for a new price of 100 euro or dollar more. And then the top version, another 100 euro more with 128 gigabyte. So wouldn't it be better for Apple to go the other way, starting with the version of 128 gigabyte and then giving people discount for having, for paying less money for the 64 or the 16 gigabyte version?
I don't know whether it would be better to give them discount, but I know they use another kind of approach. You mentioned that indirectly. They give alternatives. They give option 1, 2, 3. Because not 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 1, 2, 3, pretty much easy, but gives, this is another effect, gives the people the opportunity to avoid extremes. When you take a decision and you want to, and you are not an expert, no, not a lot of people are expert in Apple's iPad, meaning they know exactly how they will use it, which kind of memory they will need, blah, blah, blah. They tend to use very much the alternatives they have in order to make their decision. Really like a kind of a cognitive support. And giving 2, 3, 4 options give this kind of orientation. It's not loss aversion orientation, but we call it extreme aversion orientation. Okay? There was another raised hand, please.
I think in your studies, it's a lot about numbers, but I'm sure you heard about the dopamine center of the brain. According to the question before, I mean, if you take away the initial feeling, would probably stick together with go together with the brain and how it works and the psychology.
Yeah.
How often would you operate with you know, the dopamine center of the brain? Would you ever, or would you only do the numbers?
Yeah. My answer is the following. when I talk about loss aversion, is probably the only part of behavioral economics, at least what I study and talk about, that is pretty much related to like sentiments, feeling. Because we tend to concentrate on cognitive phenomena, but not telling that this is the way we decide, of course. There is another part of the story which has nothing to do with cognitive process, a lot with sentiments, a lot with feeling, but what I think is that only use cognitive frameworks can already explain a lot. And I tend to try to avoid sentiment explanation if it is enough to understand what's happening, using very simple and very easy to categorize and analyze cognitive process. This is the message. But it's by far not to say sentiment doesn't play a role in decision making. The opposite, they play a huge role. Okay?
Yeah, but it's the same, but it's another way of, yeah, measuring.
It's a complementary. It's a complementary. Let me spend these goals or self-control. We don't have a lot of time. We have goals, we have self-controls, and we have social behavior. Let me tell you something about self-control. Maybe it's important. Look at this experiment. Or let me make one step backward. How do we deal with the future in the economic theory? What is the approach there? What is the idea, the basic idea? Please?
We have a discount rate currently which we value money depending on the time frame we have.
Exactly. We tend to discount the present value of future money, cash stream, based on two elements, typically risk and time. I will not talk about risk today, but maybe some basic idea on time. The fundamental assumption about time is that it's not that important how time sensitive we are. If we have very high discount function, this is our preference, that's all. But what the economic theory assumes is that discount function are, let's say, stable. Okay? What does it mean stable? That if I prefer 100 euro today to 200 euro tomorrow, then in 10 years I will prefer 100 euro today than 200 euro in 10 years in one day. Maybe my discount rate will change in the time, but if today somebody will ask me, what do you prefer, 100 euro today or 200 tomorrow? Or 100 euro in 10 years or 200 euro in 10 years and one day, the answer should be the same, because they are parallel. This is exactly what we don't do. Behavioral economists, this is a very important aspect, they discovered that actually what is important is not only the time frame between our decision and the payoff, okay, but also the time frame, the time difference between the two options we choose from, okay, but even more important, the time frame between when we decide and when we act, when we plan a decision and when do realize that decision. It's a very important aspect. Look at this example. They ask, you just won $250 at a lottery. Right? How much would you like to receive in order to postpone your reward by 1 month? So you want 250, here's the money. Or please tell me how much more money you want in order to wait to get this money. 1 month, 3 months, 6 months, 1 year, 3 years, 5 years. And look at the numbers. Okay, if I need to wait 1 month, 300, so I ask for $50 more. If I need to wait 3 months, again 300. 6 months, again 300, 1 year 350, 3 years 500, 5 years 1000. Interesting, yes or no? Look at the discounts rate which are implied. Discounts rate is 219%, 73, 36, 34, 25. So they get very much closer to like normal, very high, but normal discounts rate. But they increase dramatically at the very beginning. So what is the message here, if you want it to simplify, is to wait 1 month. Today, till 30 days, is much more difficult than to wait 1 month in 10 years for other 30 days. Which is, from a psychological point of view, a trivial assumption, but it's an assumption which is simply not given in the whole fundamental economic theory. And this has a lot of consequences for our decision behavior. Look at this. Certificate checks immediately available, or certificate checks immobilized for 6 months. Majority chose 100, interest rate 141. But exactly the same payoff available in 6 years or in 8 years. In this case, most of the people decided the 200. So people decide, well, 100 and 200. I prefer it right now instead of waiting 6 months. But if in the future, in order to get more 100 more, I need to wait 2 years, it doesn't care. It's fine. So it's a fundamental paradox. Okay? And this is a lot of, this very simple assumption, or this very simple discovery can help us to understand a lot of so-called self-control, irrational behavior. Look at this. Diet, training, is a typical act that involves a decision today, okay, which in this case is a cost. I have to go to the gym, I have to renounce some bread, to some pasta, I don't know, and has a positive act in the future. But there is a kind of division between the moment when I make an action and the impact in this action. And then there is another kind of phenomenon, which is the so-called debt. Just imagine alcohol, cigarettes, where I get the benefits right now, if I drink, but I pay the cost on the long term. What's happening here? I just give you one example. I decide to make diet on Friday, starting on Monday. On Monday say, oh, come on, it's so difficult, okay, and I don't make the diet. But on the Friday next, I say, well, I should start again. This is the kind of behavior we very normally do every time we have the time dimension in our decision framework. And this is a very fundamental departs from the rational assumption that our discount rates stay stable independently from the moment of planification and the moment of implementation. The mismatch between planned and realized action is not only the result of external impossibilities or internal inabilities. Very often, weakness of will or failure in prediction future states drive us to act regrettably. Providing self-controlling devices can strongly support the implementation of shared plans. I would say I stop here, because otherwise we risk to get it gets too late. We have like last couple of minutes. If you have questions, more than welcome. Maybe the last 1 or 2 questions. Otherwise, we're pretty finished.
First, thank you so much for this really great insight and between leadership and behavioral economics. I have one question. We have heard a lot in our lectures or in our approaches about motivational strategies. leadership and motivation is very, very important subject. What is your idea or your key message if you are thinking of framing, psychological, cognitive, and all these factors you have mentioned, irrationality and so on. What is your key message for being a motivational leader in framework of behavioral economic ideas?
Well, the first most easy answer is, of course, make behavior easy. This is the best way. Make the implementation of the behavior, physical terms, but most of all in cognitive terms, the easiest possible. Don't ask effort when effort is not required. We do it a lot, let's say, from the client's customer side. When you really want to convince the customers to buy your product, to deal with your company, the first things you should try to do is make it as easy as possible. And I think it's very much the same in dealing with talent and especially with knowledge work. The second, of course, is a question of framing the behavior. Really give the right frame. Default, loss aversion. It's really having the right approach in dealing with the same situation, because at the end these are very much the kind of judgment mechanism and decision mechanisms that drive what we do, where we need to believe to. Okay.
Please, other questions? Additional questions? Any question? Yeah.
Do you think you can use like these behavior frameworks such as prospecting and so on to make money in the financial market in any way? Do you think behavioral finance is a thing?
I started with this differentiation, rational market, market efficiency, irrational market, irrational market valuation. I don't know whether you can do it, but I know for sure, and this is the good message, that somebody is doing it. The problem is that you cannot understand before who will be, and if you are able to do it, probably it will already be over. And I always make this kind of consideration about the ability to make money in the financial market. Just imagine, there are out there more or less 5,000 investment funds. Okay? Just imagine that the market is driven fundamentally from investment funds. So if the market goes in one direction, then more or less 50% of them will do more than the market. We will beat the market, and more or less 50% we will not beat the market. Okay? Make it a little bit more simplified. Now this is the first year. After 2, 3, 4 years, you will still find some investment funds who did beat the market. Okay, but you will never know whether they did beat the market because they had behavioral or an irrational strategy that brought them to do that, or was a simply statistical phenomenon that somebody had to beat the market. So, if possible, there are some ideas to understand that the market in some cases are very rational, but how it really is impossible to make this so-called smart money. I could not do it at the moment, at least.
Any more questions? Okay, so
thank you very much.
Thank you so much. So, as the last time, a photo together with the whole class here in front of the desk.